From tales of addiction to unlikely friendships and even falling in love, award-winning author Lauren B. Davis brings to life stories and characters that are bound to leave you full of emotions and craving more. Lauren, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, it's my pleasure, Alexandra.
So, how did you get into being an author? Was that always your career path, or did you fall into it somehow? What was your journey like?
You know, I always wanted to be a writer, but it wasn't something that I thought that I could be. One of the things that I think held me back, or at least I felt held me back, was that I left home at 16. And so I didn't go to university. And, for me, real writers were, university people. They had MFAs and all the rest of this stuff. But I kept on writing, I kept on writing, and kept on writing because it just seemed to me to be the way that I made sense of the world. I think was it John? Maybe it was Anne Dillard who said, I write to find out what I think about things. If I had any access at all to my own mind, I probably wouldn't write. And that's kind of been the path for me, is that it's where I figure out what the world is and how I feel about it.
Feels like a lot of your books carry very heavy and very real themes. A lot of them speak about addiction, love, consequences, guilt. Where did you find the strength to write about those things? You did say in your own personal life, but other than that, what drew you to those topics?
So you're right, Alexandra. You're right. I mean, some of the themes are quite weighty. I don't write I don't write romance books, although certainly there's love and romance in the books. I don't write horror books or those sorts of things. I write about what obsesses me and what bothers me.
Mhm.
And I write about things for which I can't say I understand why they've happened.
Do you feel that through the characters and through your writing, it's brought you some sort of healing or some sort of knowledge and
Sure.
foundation?
Yeah, sure. I think, it depends on the book. The first book, as I said, was about, the Great Depression, but it was also about the depression inside the house. So it was really a book about my mother's mental illness set in a time period far away to protect the guilty. So I had to put myself in her place. And I used to sort of cynically and jokingly say that the only thing, worse than having to hang around my mother was being my mother. And although I said that as a sort of nasty joke before I wrote the book, at the end of it, it was no longer a nasty joke because I understood so much more deeply and had so much compassion for the kind of blasted interior landscape that she was living in. So that absolutely healed up an awful lot. Did it make the relationship better? I think it probably did before she passed away, because I was able to have a bit more patience for her.
What's your process for writing? Do you believe in journaling? Is there anything you do that you would say is out there?
I do journal, not consistently. I journal, I keep journals for all sorts of things, and I've got them lying all over the house here. I do journals, I do spiritual journaling, I do bits for writing pieces, I do journals on, sort of major events that are going on in the world. But I'm not one of those writers who keeps a consistent journal. If a book takes me generally takes me a few years to write a book. And so if I know what's going to happen all the way through it, I'm going to be bored.
Mhm.
I'm not going to keep going. So what I do is, as I say, I sort of get this obsession in my head, and then I start thinking about what the characters are going to be, start making notes, and then I never tell myself I'm writing. I'm just making notes. I fool myself that way. And the next thing you know, I've written a few pages and, something's starting to come together. And I do that for a while. And now once I've done that to about 50, 75 pages, I get a snap vision of what the last scene is going to be. And then I start arcing towards that. I don't write out, all the scenes, but I start arcing towards that. Now, when I get to the end of the book, this scene has generally changed. There aren't the same people in it. There aren't, it's not in the same place. It's not the same weather. But what's always exactly the same is the emotional resonance in that last scene.
Mhm.
And whatever that emotional resonance is a clue to me about what I'm writing for.
What would you say the writing process is book to book? Do you ever feel that there's pressure to outdo yourself from the first book, or would you say each book is so unique in its own that you don't even think like that?
For me, every book has its own medium. It has its own life force, if you want.
Hmm.
Now, as to whether or not I think I have to outdo myself, I am convinced round about this point in the process, where well, actually several times during the process, that this book is going to be the end of my career. Every single book. Every single book.
Every time.
Every time I get to a certain place in the book and I go, well, this is garbage. What was I thinking? I don't even know why. I've just wasted 5 years of my life. I'm a terrible writer. Now everybody will know it. Up to now, I've been able to fake it. But after this book, it'll be obvious to everybody, that I'm just a hack.
That's so funny. Oh my
I'm
God.
terrible. Yeah, I generally figure that every book is going to be my last. And, one of them will be.
Right.
That's just the way it goes. So you always think you failed, I think. And then I think you're always really surprised if somebody says you haven't.
How have you seen the shift with times changing to the digital era? Like you said, people don't think there's room for short stories. Where do you see being a writer and being an author being led to with today's technology and access, attention spans, all of those things?
Yeah, one of the things that I really find inspiring is that during this horrible, awful, terrible year, that booksellers have been doing really well. And in that's not only ebook sellers, it's also brick and mortar stores. And also that it seems like the younger people really love a book. They love the object of it.
Mhm.
I mean, I have to admit, it took me a long time to want to read on a Kindle, because I like that. I'm a smell the book person. This concept of tell me a story, I don't think that's ever going to go away. I don't think it ever has, and it's always been with us since the beginning of time. And whether we're told in this medium or some other medium, the idea of the story, because it works so deeply on our souls. The,
Mhm.
these archetypes whether it's the old woman of the world, or whether it's the tramp in the alley, or whether it's the virgin queen, whatever these sort of archetypes are, they appear in all narratives, contemporary or otherwise.
Right.
And our brains recognize that, and we are altered by them, we are fed by them. So
Mhm.
I don't think that's ever going to change. I hope.
Yeah.
Eyes crossed.
I know I love reading, and like you said, I love holding a good book. And when the pandemic hit, I did get a Kindle because
Yeah.
I read so fast that, there's only so many books I could buy or order, and the library was shut down, so I got the Kindle. But, there's something about holding a book and having that deep connection and the deep read. And then I love the ones where, you end it and you sigh and you're like, that stuck with me. And
Absolutely.
you could read that 100 times over. So yeah, I don't think that's ever going to change. What is one thing you want readers to walk away feeling from your books?
I want them to walk away satisfied.
Hmm.
That this has been that this I like when people write to me and they say they like the book, I always say, I'm so glad you found something useful.
Right.
Because not every book are you going to enjoy, like it's a happy, although lots of my books do have happy endings. Let's not let's not scare them off here.
Yeah.
They're not grim, um all of them, but I want them to feel satisfied, like that held up, that kept my attention, that held up. And whether or not they've learned something, or they've learned something about themselves, they've learned something about other people. I must say, probably the most gratifying thing has come from writing The Empty Room.
Hmm.
uh, because although in some ways I wrote that for myself, only, sort of as an exercise in gratitude. um, yeah, I just can't tell you the number of people who've written to me and said they've stopped drinking because they read that book.
Wow.
And many of them I'm in touch with. And like, I don't think that anything matters more than that. Like, what could possibly matter more than that? You win a prize, you get a good review. I don't know. I just don't think that anything matters more than that.
Well, Lauren, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh,
Why don't
my
you
pleasure.
oh, thank you. Why don't you tell all the viewers where they can find you and your books?
Thanks. Well, I have a website, which is easy to remember, I hope. It's just www.laurenbdavis.com. You know, the books are available in all the usual places. You'll see links on my website. Amazon, obviously, if you're in Canada, Indigo, Chapters, the usual places.
Thank you, Lauren.